Welcome to Reimagining Miami Gardens. In this groundbreaking podcast dissertation, we examine the profound impact of leadership on government with a specific focus on how it shapes the city of Miami Gardens. Through insightful interviews, in-depth analysis, and compelling narratives, we uncover the intricate dynamics between leadership and governance, highlighting the transformative power of effective leadership in shaping the trajectory of a city. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the role of leadership in driving positive change and development in the now vibrant community of Miami Gardens.
Welcome to Reimagining Miami Gardens podcast. I'm Oliver Gilbert, the chairman of the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners and the former mayor of then the very young and vibrant city of Miami Gardens. I'm excited to dive into the complexities of leadership in driving positive change in cities today. Today, we embark on a journey to explore the challenges and opportunities faced by newly formed cities, such as Miami Gardens, in their quest for transformation. In our study, we aim to address the pressing issues that hinder city progress, from bureaucratic obstacles to limited resources, and the critical role that leadership plays in overcoming these challenges. The purpose of our research and the discussions on this podcast is to uncover the strategies employed by city leaders to drive successful city transformation initiatives and provide insights into the essential elements of effective leadership in urban development. Join me as we navigate through the intricacies of city management through policy and administration, examine the importance of collaboration and strategic decision-making, and uncover the valuable lessons learned from successful city transformation initiatives. Together, let's explore transformative power of leadership in shaping the future of our cities. In this episode, we're going to discuss an issue that's very important to the residents of Miami Gardens: public safety. We will discuss the way Miami Gardens handled a major crisis dealing with crime in the community and the city's leadership's approach to ensuring safety for its residents. Joining me today is Theresa, the former city manager of North Miami and the chief operating officer for the Board of County Commissioners.
Chairman Gilbert, thanks for having me again.
Oh, always. Listen, we're going to let you hang out a little bit in Miami Gardens. It's fine.
Just a little bit. All right, let's go right into our discussion. So Miami Gardens, great city, but it has had several issues with respect to perception. One of the biggest issues was definitely crime. And if we're being honest, some called Miami Gardens murder gardens.
Yeah.
During your time as mayor, you had a major crisis, a spate of shootings in your city. 11 shootings in 10 days.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Listen, 11 shootings in 10 days. First of all, there's a lot of questions. The loaded question. There's a lot of stuff in there and all things that are accurate. First, I'll talk about murder gardens. You know, it's so interesting that people picked up the moniker murder gardens, and it was actually residents who started it. And one of the things that I would always talk to residents about is you don't hear, people who live on Miami Beach calling it Rape Beach, even though they let they let the state in the number of rapes and sexual assaults. You don't hear them doing that. You should never tell your worst story. You should never point out your most hideous attribute. That was the first thing that I said. But I remember being mayor of Miami Gardens when we had 11 shootings in 10 days. I remember that. And it was like, when you're a young mayor and it's a relatively young city and you have something like that happen, it's you get a bunker mentality at first. Like you kind of like hunker down. And I remember talking to the police chief at the time, and the police chief saying, well, we're going to do whatever we can. I was like, well, what does that mean? Do you know who's doing the shootings? Are the shootings related? And so as a former prosecutor, I would start to ask those types of questions because ultimately I needed to understand not all crime is the same. So there's a difference from a crime perspective in a gang problem and a crime of opportunity problem. So I need to understand whether we had one or the other. And understanding that was the very beginning of it. And then addressing the community and addressing their concerns. People need to feel safe. Talking to them through what we're going to do in the short term, and then talking them through what we're going to do in the long term, because those answers weren't going to be the same. And in the short term, we can do certain things to lock down the city to make, crime and criminals feel very, very, very unsure about their ability to actually carry a gun and fire a gun in public, leave their house with them. We can do those things. But long term, how do we address this issue? And then doing something else, letting them know that we are going to get through this, that this problem is not going to be something that necessarily lingers for us, that we're going to get past this, that they might have us here like number 15 on an FBI's more violent list, but we're going to be off that list completely. Assuring them that we're going to put forth plans to actually be off that list completely, working that issue. So it was what we actually do, but actually how we listen to the community, how we understand what their concerns are, how we make our responses reflective and responsive to those concerns, and then how we actually develop a plan that moves the community forward is what we had to do during that time.
What were some of your specific measures for the short term?
Oh, short term is where we're going to make it uncomfortable for criminals. One of the problems that we had was that we had gangs, and gangs were shooting at each other, and in course of shooting at each other, it would make people unsafe. And so one of the things that we said was, and I've always said, listen, for people to shoot somebody, they have to feel comfortable leaving their house with guns. So what we're going to do is, we know who the gangs are. We know who the shooters are. We're gonna flood those areas. We're gonna flood those areas with the officers. We're going to make contact with those folks. If the people who we know or we believe are shooters are affiliated with a gang, if they're on probation, we're going to partner with the state. We're going to partner with MDPD. We're going to do probation checks twice a week, so that they always know that we're actually always in the neighborhood. They always know that we're always watching. I don't want to hide our visibility with them. There was an idea in policing that, well, we can surveil them. I don't want to surveil them. I don't want you just watching them. I want them seeing you, because them seeing you is the actual deterrent. You watching them helps us build a case if they shoot and you witness it. Them seeing you stops them from shooting. So it's not about surveillance. That's one thing. That's how you actually build a case. That's fine. What I want to do is prevent it. So I want them to know or believe that there is always someone around them, such that they don't think that they can actually be in Miami Gardens and pull this gun and fire this trigger, because they don't actually want to get caught. If it were a crime of passion, crimes of passion are one thing, because what you're saying is people get so angry and upset in the moment that they can't control themselves, and they do something they would not ordinarily do. They wouldn't ordinarily do. So those people might not be able to control themselves in that time. But this isn't that. This is people actually planning something out. Well, if they have to plan for you actually being there, they probably won't do it. So in the short term, we know that we can abate that type of violence by flooding a zone. We know that we can abate that type of violence by increasing our visibility. We know that we can abate that type of violence by, within the realms of the Constitution, saying, hey, you know what? We're just going to, if you go there, we're going to go there too. You're driving there, we're going to drive there too. Are you going to the store? Do you need a ride? Are you going to go hang out at the flea market? Let us hang out with you. You going to hang out in the park? Well, we like parks. Let's play basketball with you. We're going to be around. And then when you're in your house, we're going to do probation checks if you're on probation. We're going to make our presence in your life. We're going to be your girlfriend. We're going to be your boyfriend. We're going to be here with you, so that you know how serious we are about you not being a part of our violence problem. And people initially said something like that wouldn't work, but it did. It did, because they don't actually want to go to prison. They say they're not afraid to go to prison, but really they don't want to go. So it did work. And so in the short term, that type of thing actually worked. Now, we took heat for that. But ultimately, it's about making sure people are safe and making sure people feel safe. You can't build a city if folks don't feel safe. You can't increase investment. You can't increase home ownership. You can't do that if folks don't feel safe. So you have to invest in that. And so we did invest in that for a short-term solution, short-term effect.
And in that short term, how did you communicate with the residents?
Oh, it would be everything. We had town hall meetings. I did more press conferences than I would normally do. I'm not a big press conference person. I don't necessarily, because I'm kind of jaded about how the press operates and how they operated with regard to Miami Gardens. I wasn't necessarily saying, oh yeah, let's talk to the press. I didn't think that they had an interest in painting Miami Gardens or our efforts in a real meaningfully positive way. So I wasn't a big press person, but I would make myself available. I would do those community meetings and I would be out there talking. I would go to the churches and let me talk to you all about this. So whereas people would hide from it, I'm not going to hide from it. I'm going to lean into this. And if there's going to be a face associated with this problem, it's going to be mine, but it's not going to be the problem exists. It's going to be the problem's going to be solved. And so I was a very young mayor at that time and just coming off really being elected. And what we knew is that my brand was stronger in some respects than the city brand. And so what we did was we started, everything's going to be orange and green. That's my brand. We're going to push it. We're going to start to message the way that I message. These initiatives that we're doing, we're not going to do them in secret. We're going to actually tell you what we're doing. We're going to over communicate. I want the people who would be criminals to know exactly what it is we're doing. I want them to see us outside their houses. I want them to see us on the parks that they're driving by so they know that this is a deterrent. That if you wanted to do something like this, you can't do it here, not unless you want to get caught. And so we were able in the short term to actually abate some of the crime that way.
So in terms of the short term, we talked about the short term. What are some of the things that you did long term?
Oh, listen, I answered the questions of crime, not necessarily with policing. And we did some policing. I created the policy where we would send young kids from the community to the police academy to become police officers, because I wanted police officers who understood the community, who had relationships, who people felt comfortable talking to. And so I wanted them to be that way. And so our brand of community policing was to actually create police officers from the community. That's what we did. But we also did stuff like invest in a general obligation bond, $60 million. And I said, hey, listen, you all, I want to take $60 million and I want to do some things. I want to invest in parks. And people said, parks? I said, yeah, you want to prevent crime? I want to invest in parks, because I looked at some of our growing stats, and our growing stats was that we had young people getting involved in crime, young people getting involved in violent crime. I want to engage those kids at a much younger age. So let's invest in parks. Let's invest in doing science, technology, engineering, mathematics, recording studios, television production areas, all on public parks. Let's do something else. We can't hire 5,000 police officers or 200,000 police. These huge numbers. We need 1,000. We don't need 1,000 police officers. What we're going to do is engage in technology in a way. We're going to build out the best real-time crime center in Miami-Dade County, exist in Miami Gardens, and we're going to put up ShotSpotter and license plate readers. And ShotSpotter is this device that whenever a gun is fired, it tells you within a quarter of a mile where it was fired from. And it goes directly to our real-time crime center, and we can dispatch police officers right away. So it made it more challenging to shoot guns and get away, because we can cordon off areas. We can find you. It made it easier to do that. But then we also incorporated license plate readers, mobile and stationary, so that at any given time, every car that's on the road is going through. Well, if there's a tag that flags that has a warrant associated with it or anything like that, it immediately pops. And we immediately know they're here, and we know that we can actually engage them. And then we also did something with our building development. With the development that was happening in Miami Gardens, we gave them incentives to put up cameras along their developments and link it to the real-time crime center. So with that, I took the development that was happening, incorporated public safety, made it a little cheaper for them. And now we have more eyes in more places, allowing us to augment police presence without a police person. We needed to be able to do that because we needed to be able to police even if we weren't there, secure even if we weren't present. Activity that I didn't like. And those things were things that I would openly talk about, like being very transparent. And they would always resonate because they were things that that I had gotten from residents when I listened to them. So when I talk about understanding who Miami Gardens is and what we can become, my understanding of who Miami Gardens is because I was born and raised here, but also I just took the time to listen. Just took the time to listen to what you're saying and what you mean. And that was helpful in how we developed the strategies that eventually transformed Miami Gardens.
How did you measure the effectiveness of your initiatives and your intervention in reducing crime?
Well, some of it was numbers. Some of it was numbers, crime going down. But I was always careful not to just lean on numbers, because what would happen is you'd have somebody crazy do something, like somebody goes crazy and a father goes crazy and he shoots the wife, unfortunately, and the kid, unfortunately, and himself. You got 3 homicides. And so the numbers are not reflective. So the numbers was one thing, but also other metrics like development, because money goes where money feels safe. So development was a metric, and then also community feelings. We would have people would talk negatively about their own city. That started to decrease some, and we start to have more people coming out to community events. And so we start to challenge, some of the norms, and they would hear me push back against people who would speak negatively about Miami Gardens, because I'm going to have pride in my city, and they should have pride in their city. And then one of the things that I would also say is, when all of this crime happened, somebody led a brand new mayor, somebody led a motion to recall me. And I think it got like 4 signatures. And so we knew that the residents weren't like, yeah, no, we're not going to blame him for this. But even besides that, and this is not a metric that most people can lean on, but while I was mayor, no incumbent ever lost an election. So if you ever want a true measure of what people think about the direction of a city, no incumbent lost an election and nothing ever came close. I didn't lose an election, not as mayor of Miami Gardens, because what we were doing was well received and well understood.
When it comes to crime, what do you think are some of the best leadership styles that are more helpful in terms of working in changing a community?
Oh man, it really, it just really depends, right? So in some respects, in the heat of the moment, you really need like a great man, a great woman theory. You need someone who people are looking at like with absolute strength. Like they need to have confidence in one person. And that can be, your mayor, it can be your manager, it could be your police chief. It could be, they need to have like this person's gonna, and that's why it was important for me to stand, look squarely into the camera. This is what I'm saying. This will not be allowed. This is what we're going to do. Speaking very certainly, at that point, I wasn't, a mayor who was sitting as a portion of the city council. I was the head of a city. And I was expressing a direction that whether I had the actual authority or the perceived authority to implement, this is what we're going to do. Now, how we came to the things that actually became transformative for Miami Gardens, I would definitely say it's like, if I had to pick a leadership, I say servant leadership. Because you really did have to listen to people. You really did have to understand exactly what it is they meant, what they were saying, and what they were meaning. You had to incorporate some level of healing. Because when you have that type of violence in the community, it doesn't just hurt the family that lost somebody. It hurts your confidence, your faith in who we are. You feel less safe. That's why it's not just, when the police arrest you and when the prosecutors prosecute you, it's a crime against the state, not a crime against the person. Because we're all injured when you have that type of violence. Talking to folks, listening, being able to persuade them, coming up with some type of solution that could possibly solve the problem. Those are the type of things that when I look at it and I look at the components of servant leadership, I think those are the characteristics that are important, because when you're in a situation like that and you have to solve the problem, and those are the things that allows you to, as a leader, take the type of input, communicate that you understand what they're going through, conceptualize how you actually plan on getting them through this, and then be a good steward and actually stay the course, with the understanding that it wasn't going to always be easy and it wasn't going to ever really be popular. It's not something that, I would put on my resume, hey, I stood in the paint at this time and I stood in front of this camera and I told them that this wasn't going to be. That's not on my public service resume. That's not something anyone ever tries to highlight. But it's important when you have cities, especially young cities, who are actually challenged with these type of situations. You need that type of strength. You need that type of empathy. You need that type of healing. You need that type of problem solving that allows you to move the community forward.
Personally, as a young mayor, what was one of your biggest fears when this crisis came about?
It's interesting. I don't know that I can identify one huge fear, but there was a feeling. I think there was a moment where I wondered whether I was strong enough to do this, whether I had the capacity to bring the community with me. And so, the council was always the council. They were going to always be supportive of me. We worked well together, but it was always clear that it was going to be me. And so when you know it's going to be you, and I think this goes back to when I talked about being a great man. I don't know that I necessarily subscribe to that theory, but in situations like that, Miami Gardens is a mayor, manager, council form of government, but in situations like that, there's just the mayor. There is just the mayor. That's it. And so the questions wasn't going to be the city's ability to do something was directly tied to my ability to get it done and my resolve to see it done. And so it was going to be a personal test. And the question that I would have had, that I did have at that time, is whether I was up to the task. And the only way you answer that question is by doing it. Like just doing it. Not being afraid of failing, because either way, you don't have a choice. You have to do something. Do it. And so that's what I would point to.
In terms of a new city and creating a new city, what would you tell other leaders who are leading a city, and what are the best ways to combat crime or to react or respond to crime?
There isn't a formula. Everybody's going to do different. Find out what type of crime you have, who's committing them from a demographic perspective, from an age perspective. Target your strategy. Make your strategy targeted to your specific problem. Don't believe that there's one thing that someone else did. We take lessons from other people, from the technology to the engagement to we created our version of community policing for that. But that's a good example that I had to figure out what was right for us. We had a young police department that was even younger than the city. The city's incorporated in 2003. I think the police department maybe 2005 or 2007. So we had a young police department. So my answer to how we actually make the police department connected more to the community wasn't the community policing programs or that everyone had typically done. It was finding a way to make the police reflective of the community. And so that's how we create our community policing program. Understanding that there's no cookie cutter answer to this. Always listen. Always listen. Take the time to listen to residents. If you listen to what they're telling you, you'd be surprised at some of the answers that you could, or the responses that you give to some of their questions or their problems, and your solutions might not take a lot if you just listen. Sometimes they just needed reassurance. And then don't be afraid to tell people no, and don't be afraid to say that sometimes somebody might have to go to jail. Sometimes jail's required. Sometimes that's the answer. Not every answer. Look, I love mentorship programs. I love engaging kids, but I'm also very clear that if you do, there's some things that you do that require you to go to jail. That is, and so taking that, a lot of times when we're talking about things, because we don't want to put the harshest thing out there, we don't want to talk about that component of it. In the real world, that component of it has to exist. That fear is an active part in getting people to comply with the law, and we need compliance with the law.
Who would you say were some of your best supporters when it came to the measures that you've put into place? And for those who didn't, how did you get them to come along?
You assume I got them to come along. I don't. I don't assume that they actually came along. I think some of my detractors who said it couldn't be done, it wouldn't be done, and it couldn't be done, are still detractors even after we've done it. So I don't know that I got them to come along, but law enforcement. But what I found was, I found great strength in the faith community, the preachers in the community. My roots and my basis, like from my dad, and the preachers in the area, was very helpful because I could always go to a church. I could always talk to people, and they understood the idea and the concept of faith. They understood the concept of doing something together, like adding up a little bit, everybody's little bit to make a lot. They understood that concept, and that's the basic concept that I was bringing to the community, adding these little efforts to make big change, everybody's little efforts. And so the preachers in the community stood by me when no one else stood by me, when police officers didn't stand by me because I was saying, hey, we're going to have implicit bias training implemented mandatory. We're going to have community policing training implemented mandatory. We're going to have mental. We had all of these things. So I'm going to give you all of these abilities to actually get trained, but then I'm going to make you accountable to those standards because you're a professional police department, and professional police departments need to behave professionally. And so that was something. So it wasn't going to all be positive on the end. And in the community, people don't like to hear that maybe your kid's a little bad and they need to get arrested. People don't like to hear that. Well, hey, I called the police and I just wanted them to no. If you call the police on your son and he's committed a crime, he's very likely going to get arrested. If you don't want him to get arrested, don't call the police. A lot of times people don't actually want to hear the truth, but presenting the truth, a truth that wasn't relative to who I was talking to. It was the truth all the time. Whether I'm in front of community activists or the PBA, this is it. This is what we're doing. I'm not going to necessarily make anybody happy, but I am going to be the person who solves the problem. The people who stood with me were preachers and my mama. Preachers and my mama. That was about it.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
It can be done. Look, people look at areas that are plagued with violence. It can be done. And so the question is whether you're willing to actually commit, not just the resources, but changing your thinking, addressing the problems. It can be done. People generally are uncomfortable with change, but people always say they want something different. The strength and the power of leadership is to reconcile those things. And when they're not reconcilable, let them know you want something different, then we got to do something different. You can't say you want economic development, but you don't want to change zoning. You can't say you want more programming for kids, but you don't want to pay more money for parks. You can't say those things. If you want the omelet, you're gonna have to break this egg. You're gonna have to apply some heat. You're gonna have to put some seasoning on there. You're gonna have to scramble. You're gonna have to do something different. That egg doesn't become an omelet sitting on that counter. You have to do something. And if leaders take that, if people in the community take that, if we all just understand that implicitly, that we all say we want change, but we all balk at doing things differently. If we reconcile within ourselves that premise is not compatible, it's not something that's workable. If we get past that, if we can preach that, if we can make that, become evangelists of that, if we can do that, then you'd be surprised at things that we can accomplish.
Thank you for listening to Reimagining Miami Gardens. Join us for our next episode as we dive into the leadership principles that guided the transformation of Miami Gardens into the vibrant city it is today. Until then,